Before potatoes conquered Europe, Romans had already mastered sustainable superfoods. These forgotten crops sustained legions, nourished emperors, and built an empire that spanned 3 continents. Dig into ancient Roman cookbooks and you'll discover a surprising hero, the humble lupini bean. This protein powerhouse outperformed potatoes in nearly every way, yet almost vanished from our dinner tables. But why? If you've ever wandered through an Italian market and spotted small yellow beans soaking in brine, you've encountered the forgotten hero of Roman nutrition. Lupini beans, or Lupinus albus, as botanists call them, weren't just another crop in ancient Rome. They were the nutritional foundation that helped build an empire spanning 3 continents. Archaeological excavations at Roman military camps, from Hadrian's Wall in Britain to desert outposts in North Africa, consistently uncover lupini bean remains. These unassuming legumes appear in food storage areas, waste pits, and cooking zones, confirming their ubiquity throughout Roman territories. At the Vindolanda Fort, near modern-day Hexham, England, preserved food stores revealed lupini beans alongside grains and other provisions, standard issue for legionaries stationed at the empire's edge. Roman agricultural writers took lupini beans seriously enough to devote considerable attention to their cultivation. Columella's De Re Rustica, the most comprehensive Roman farming manual, provides detailed instructions for planting, harvesting, and processing lupini beans. Written in the 1st century CE, his work describes lupini as particularly beneficial to exhausted fields, while providing substantial nourishment to both humans and livestock. Unlike modern beans that need rich soil and regular care, lupini beans thrived in the challenging Mediterranean climate. They grew in poor, sandy soils where other crops failed, required minimal irrigation, and naturally enriched the ground for future plantings. For practical Romans, these attributes made lupini beans the perfect crop for expanding territories and feeding growing populations. What distinguished lupini beans from other legumes was their remarkable versatility. Roman cooks served them fresh when young, dried them for year-round use, ground them into flour for bread, and even fermented them into condiments. Every part of Roman society consumed them, from slaves working the fields to emperors dining in palatial halls. When famine threatened, stored lupini beans often meant the difference between survival and starvation. While most modern legumes like chickpeas and lentils provide decent nutrition, they pale in comparison to what lupini beans offered Roman bodies. A typical Roman soldier marching 20 miles under full pack needed dense nutrition in portable form, exactly what these beans provided. While lupini beans might look like unassuming yellow discs, their nutritional profile would make modern superfoods look like nutritional lightweights in comparison. The nutritional profile of lupini beans would impress even the most zealous modern health influencer. These beans pack an astonishing 26-36% protein by weight, significantly higher than chickpeas, 20%, lentils, 18%, or even soybeans, 25%. A single cup of cooked lupini beans provided Roman legionaries with nearly 26 grams of complete protein, containing all 9 essential amino acids humans need for muscle repair and growth. What makes lupini beans truly exceptional is their unusual carbohydrate structure. Despite containing substantial carbohydrates, their glycemic index hovers around 15, dramatically lower than potatoes, 85, or wheat bread, 70. This means lupini beans release energy slowly, providing sustained power rather than quick spikes and crashes. For Romans performing hours of physical labor, whether building aqueducts, marching in formation, or working fields, this steady energy release proved invaluable. The mineral content of lupini beans further distinguished them from other foods available to Romans. A single serving delivers 15% of daily manganese, 10% of daily copper, and substantial amounts of magnesium and folate. These nutrients supported crucial bodily functions from bone formation to wound healing, essential for a population constantly engaged in physical activity and military campaigns. Lupini beans contain almost no starch compared to potatoes, which are approximately 20% starch by weight. Instead, lupini beans provide soluble fibre, which helped Romans maintain digestive health despite a diet otherwise heavy in wheat and occasionally meat. The high fibre content, approximately 11 grams per cup, also created a feeling of fullness, allowing soldiers and labourers to work longer between meals. For Roman military commanders, lupini beans solved multiple logistical problems simultaneously. Their exceptional protein-to-weight ratio meant troops could carry sufficient nutrition for extended campaigns without overburdening themselves. The beans' long shelf life, up to 3 years when properly dried, allowed for stockpiling in military storehouses across the empire. Archaeological analysis of human remains from Roman military sites shows remarkably good bone density and muscle attachment sites, indicating excellent nutrition despite harsh conditions. Feeding an empire spanning 3 continents required food that was nutritionally dense, easily transported, and simple to prepare. Criteria that lupini beans met perfectly. The remarkable nutrition of lupini beans wasn't just good for Roman bodies, it was equally beneficial for Roman farmland, creating an agricultural cycle that modern sustainable farmers would envy. Roman farmers understood lupini beans as more than just food. They were living soil factories. Unlike most crops that deplete soil, lupini beans actually enriched it through a remarkable partnership with soil bacteria. Their roots develop nodules housing rhizobium bacteria, which capture atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into forms plants can use. A single season of lupini cultivation could add up to 200 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, comparable to modern fertilizer applications, but without any industrial chemicals. Pliny the Elder, in his encyclopedic Natural History, described lupini beans as requiring the worst soil and making it better. Roman farmers observed that fields planted with lupini beans for just 1 season produced wheat yields up to 30% higher the following year. This natural fertilization effect allowed continuous cultivation of fields that would otherwise require fallow periods. What made lupini beans particularly valuable to Roman agriculture was their ability to thrive in marginal lands. They grew successfully in sandy coastal soils along the Mediterranean, in the acidic volcanic regions near Rome, and even in the more alkaline conditions of North Africa. This adaptability allowed Romans to bring previously unproductive lands into cultivation, expanding agricultural capacity throughout their territories. Columella's agricultural manual, De Re Rustica, specifically recommended lupini beans for drought-prone areas, noting they resist the summer heat when other plants wither. Their deep taproots can reach moisture up to 6 feet below the surface, allowing them to produce reliable harvests even during dry years when grain crops might fail. For an empire frequently threatened by famine, this resilience proved crucial for food security. Roman farmers developed sophisticated crop rotation systems centered around lupini beans. The typical pattern involved growing wheat for 2 years, followed by lupini beans in the 3rd year to restore soil fertility. Archaeological evidence from Roman villa farms in Italy, Spain, and North Africa reveals dedicated fields for this rotation, sometimes with separate irrigation systems optimized for each crop. As Rome expanded, legionaries often planted lupini beans in newly conquered territories as one of the first agricultural activities. Seeds were light to transport, grew in poor frontier soils, and produced harvests within a single season. Frontier provinces from Britain to Egypt show evidence of lupini cultivation appearing simultaneously with permanent Roman settlements, creating a sustainable food system that supported further expansion. The ability of lupini beans to grow in harsh conditions made them perfect for feeding Rome's most important resource: the unstoppable legions that expanded the empire from Britain to Babylon. Roman legions marched on lupini beans. Archaeological excavations at military encampments across the empire consistently uncover these beans in food storage areas and waste pits. At Vindolanda, fort near Hadrian's Wall in Britain, preserved supply records list lupinat alongside wheat, barley and olive oil as standard issue rations. These unassuming legumes helped fuel the most formidable fighting force of the ancient world. The Roman military operated like a precisely calibrated machine, and feeding that machine required extraordinary logistical planning. Each legionary received approximately 3,000 calories daily to support marching up to 20 miles under 60-pound packs before constructing fortified camps. Lupini beans provided an ideal solution to this caloric challenge. A single pound of dried lupini beans contains roughly 1,600 calories and 115 grams of protein, enough to sustain a soldier through an entire day of combat operations when supplemented with a small portion of bread. Military quartermasters prized lupini beans for their exceptional shelf life. Properly dried, they remained edible for 2 to 3 years without spoilage, far longer than meat or most grains. Vegetius, writing in his military manual De Re Militari, advised that armies should carry foods that do not spoil, specifically recommending lupini beans for extended campaigns. When Rome's legions ventured into unknown territories, these long-lasting provisions meant the difference between victory and starvation. The beans travelled in soldiers' personal kits inside leather pouches, already processed to remove bitter compounds. Each legionary typically carried a 5-day supply, about 2 pounds of dried beans. When multiplied across a standard legion of 5,000 men, this amounted to 5 tons of lupini beans in constant transit throughout the empire. Supply trains followed with additional provisions for longer campaigns. Preparation remained remarkably simple, even under battlefield conditions. Soldiers would soak the beans in water overnight in their helmets or shields, then either eat them cold or quickly boil them over campfires. Some archaeological sites reveal cooking pits with charred lupini remains, suggesting soldiers sometimes roasted them directly in hot ash when cooking vessels weren't available. Cassius Dio, chronicling Trajan's Dacian campaigns, noted that when other supplies failed to reach the front lines, legionaries sustained themselves on lupini and water alone for 8 days, while maintaining sufficient strength to defeat enemy forces. This remarkable endurance gave Roman commanders strategic advantages that few opponents could match. While lupini beans kept Roman soldiers marching across continents back in Rome's kitchens, creative cooks were discovering dozens of ways to transform these humble legumes into dishes worthy of both peasants and patricians. Rome's culinary traditions transformed the humble lupini bean into dishes that range from simple street food to sophisticated banquet fare. In wealthy homes, specially trained cooks prepared elaborate lupini dishes, while in modest apartments, families soaked and seasoned them. According to regional traditions passed down through generations. Unlike many foods that marked social divisions, lupini beans cross class boundaries, appearing on tables throughout Roman society. The celebrated cookbook of Apicius, De Re Coquinaria, includes several lupini preparations that showcase their versatility. One notable recipe instructs cooks to boil debited lupini beans with leeks, coriander and cumin, then dress them with olive oil, garum, fermented fish sauce, and a splash of wine. Another preparation recommends mashing cooked lupini beans with pepper, lovage and garum to create a paste served with bread, Essentially, a Roman hummus, some 2,000 years before chickpea versions became popular. Before any culinary magic could happen, Romans had to address the bean's natural bitterness. The traditional debittering process involved a multi-day soaking regimen in which beans were first soaked in water for 24 hours, then transferred to fresh water daily for up to 5 days until the bitter compounds leached out. Salt was often added to the final soaking water to enhance flavour. This labour-intensive process explains why processed lupini beans became one of Rome's earliest convenience foods, sold ready to eat by street vendors. Roman seasonings for lupini dishes reflected both regional availability and social status. Common people typically flavoured them with locally grown herbs like oregano and thyme, while wealthy households might add expensive imported spices such as pepper from India or silphium from North Africa. Nearly all preparations incorporated garum, the fermented fish sauce that defined Roman cuisine much as soy sauce characterises Asian cooking today. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii reveals specialised pottery containers designed specifically for serving lupini beans. Small bowls with fitted lids that kept the beans moist during meals. These serving vessels appear in homes across the social spectrum, from modest apartments to luxurious villas, confirming the universal popularity of lupini beans in Roman dining. During religious festivals, lupini beans often featured in ritual meals honouring agricultural deities. The Saturnalia celebrations in December included lupini beans prepared with honey and baked into special festival cakes, symbolising the sweetness that could come from something initially bitter, a metaphor Romans found particularly meaningful. The process of debittering lupini beans wasn't just culinary wisdom. It represented sophisticated chemical knowledge that demonstrated Rome's advanced understanding of food science long before such concepts existed. Roman food science advanced centuries beyond its time through systematic experimentation with lupini processing. Though they couldn't identify alkaloids by name, Roman farmers and cooks understood these bitter compounds could be methodically removed through precise water management. The debittering process, revealed in both written records and archaeological evidence, followed a remarkably consistent pattern across the empire. The initial soaking lasted exactly 24 hours in cold water, after which the beans were transferred to a second container of fresh water. This water change occurred daily, with each villa and farmstead maintaining specialised ceramic vessels specifically for this purpose. Archaeological digs have uncovered paired soaking containers, one typically larger than the other, allowing for continuous processing as fresh batches entered the system, while completed ones exited. After approximately 5 days of changing water, the final step introduced salt, typically sea salt for coastal regions or mineral salt for inland areas. This critical addition accelerated the extraction of remaining bitter compounds while beginning the flavouring process. The entire procedure required about 1/6 the water needed for processing modern almonds or olives, demonstrating remarkable efficiency in water-scarce Mediterranean environments. For long-term storage, Romans employed 3 primary preservation methods. The first and most common involved thoroughly drying beans in the sun until they reached less than 10% moisture content, then storing them in sealed amphorae with a sprinkle of wood ash to prevent insect infestation. Excavations of Roman granaries have revealed lupini beans preserved this way that remained intact after nearly 2 millennia. Underground. The second method involved brining fully debitted beans in a solution of salt water, sometimes flavoured with herbs or vinegar. These brined lupini beans travelled throughout the empire in distinctive wide-mouthed ceramic containers, some bearing merchant stamps, identifying their origin from specialised processing centres in Spain and North Africa. Perhaps most fascinating was the fermentation method, where partially debitted beans were allowed to undergo controlled fermentation with salt and sometimes wheat bran. This technique, described by Columella as producing lupini of exceptional digestibility, created a probiotic food similar to modern fermented soy products. Written records show these preservation techniques evolved to incorporate regional adaptations as lupini cultivation spread. In humid northern provinces, smoking dried beans became common practice, while in Egypt, beans were often sealed in honey for prestigious households, an expensive but remarkably effective preservation method. The Romans' ability to store lupini beans for years wasn't just convenient. It was life-saving during periods when the empire faced its greatest threats from within and without. During times of crisis, stored lupini beans often stood between Rome and catastrophe. The devastating famine of 22 CE, recorded by historian Tacitus, saw grain prices soar to nearly 10 times normal rates. Emperor Tiberius responded by distributing emergency lupini bean rations from imperial warehouses. Archaeological evidence from this period shows a dramatic spike in lupini bean consumption across all social classes, with disposal pits in Rome containing up to 5 times the normal quantity of lupini shell remnants compared to pre-famine years. Unlike Rome's staple grain, wheat, which required massive imports from Egypt and North Africa, lupini beans could be grown locally throughout Italy and most provinces. This agricultural autonomy proved crucial when shipping lanes were disrupted by storms, piracy, or conflict. During the tumultuous year of the 4 emperors, 69 CE, when civil war disrupted Mediterranean shipping for months, urban populations relied heavily on stored lupini beans as wheat supplies dwindled. Suetonius notes that Vespasian, upon securing power, immediately ordered expanded lupini cultivation on imperial estates to prevent future shortages. The Roman grain dole, annona, provided wheat to hundreds of thousands of citizens, but protein sources remained scarce for the urban poor. To address this nutritional gap, administrators occasionally supplemented the grain allowance with lupini beans. Stone inscriptions from the reigns of Claudius and Trajan commemorate these distributions, suggesting their political importance as demonstrations of imperial care. One tablet from Ostia details the distribution of 5 modi of lupini to each registered family during a shortage in 103 CE. Economic calculations reveal that producing protein from lupini beans cost approximately 1/4 as much as obtaining the same nutrition from meat, making them essential to feeding Rome's million-plus inhabitants. Storage facilities dedicated to lupini beans have been identified archaeological at major ports, including Ostia and Puteoli, with capacity to hold enough beans to feed the urban population for several months. The famous Roman physician Galen specifically recommended lupini beans during food shortages, writing that they sustain the body admirably when other foods are unavailable and prevent the wasting that accompanies prolonged hunger. Human remains from periods of food insecurity show fewer markers of malnutrition in regions where lupini consumption was highest, confirming Galen's observations. For ordinary Romans, maintaining a private store of dried lupini beans represented essential food security. Household storage containers specifically designed for lupini preservation appear commonly in archaeological excavations, particularly in lower and middle-class dwellings, where food insecurity posed the greatest threat. These family reserves often meant survival when public distributions failed or were insufficient. While lupini beans helped the common people survive hard times, their importance extended far beyond practical necessity. They wove themselves into the very fabric of Roman religion and ritual. Lupini beans transcended their nutritional value to become powerful religious symbols throughout Roman society. During the Lupercalia festival each February, priests of the fertility god Lupercus prepared special ritual cakes containing lupini bean flour. These sacred offerings, called februar, gave the month its name and were believed to promote fertility in both fields and families. The beans' ability to enrich soil while providing sustenance made them natural symbols of agricultural abundance and regeneration. The cult of Ceres, goddess of agriculture, maintained a particularly strong association with lupini beans. Priestesses of Ceres wore distinctive ceremonial garments adorned with golden lupini bean motifs during important agricultural festivals. Archaeological excavations at the Temple of Ceres in Rome revealed dedicated offering vessels containing carbonized lupini beans, suggesting regular ritual sacrifices spanning several centuries. Ritually prepared, lupini differed significantly from everyday preparations. For ceremonies honouring chthonic, underworld deities, beans were soaked in sheep's blood before being burned as offerings. Conversely, for festivals of celestial deities, beans were whitened with chalk and suspended from temple ceilings. These contrasting preparations reflected the beans' symbolic connection to both the underworld and celestial realms. Ovid's Fasti describes an ancient ritual where Roman families tossed black lupini beans over their shoulders at midnight during the Lemuria festival in May, believing this would appease restless ancestral spirits. While performing this ritual, the head of the household would recite 9 times, "With these beans I redeem myself and my family." This practice established lupini beans as mediators between the living and the dead. The symbolic connection between lupini beans and the afterlife extended to funerary practices. Burial sites frequently contain ceramic vessels of lupini beans as provisions for the deceased's journey. Wealthier tombs sometimes featured wall paintings depicting lupini plants or carved stone representations of the beans, emphasizing their importance even in death. Architectural evidence of lupini beans' cultural significance appears in several surviving buildings. The capital of a column in the Forum of Augustus features lupini bean designs among agricultural motifs, while a mosaic floor in Ostia depicts a merchant selling lupini beans alongside sacred objects, visually linking commerce and religious practice. Superstitions surrounding lupini beans persisted throughout Roman history. Pliny the Elder noted that certain Roman priests avoided eating lupini beans, believing they contained the souls of the dead, a prohibition possibly borrowed from Pythagorean traditions. Yet most Romans embraced them as symbols of resilience, transformation, and divine favour in an uncertain world. The sacred status of lupini beans didn't protect them from becoming tools of political power, as Roman leaders soon discovered the extraordinary control that came with managing their empire's food supply. The political elite of Rome quickly recognized that controlling lupini bean production meant controlling people. Emperor Augustus established the first official lupini bean reserves in 22 BCE, strategically positioning warehouses throughout Italy. These stores gave him leverage during periods of unrest, a fact not lost on subsequent emperors who expanded the system. When Claudius faced riots in 51 CE, he immediately authorized emergency distributions of stored lupini beans, effectively buying public calm during a grain shortage. Price records carved on stone tablets from markets in Pompeii reveal that lupini beans sold for approximately 1/3 the cost of wheat by volume, yet provided comparable calories and superior protein. This economic efficiency made them essential to urban food systems. During the reign of Diocletian, his famous price edict of 301 CE set maximum prices for lupini beans at 100 denarii per modius, approximately 8.7 litres, recognising their strategic importance to imperial economics. Specialised trade networks developed around lupini cultivation and processing. Merchant guilds, collegia, dedicated specifically to lupini bean trade, appear in inscriptions from major port cities. The Corpus Lupinariorum operated from Ostia, coordinating shipments throughout the Mediterranean with standardized contracts and quality controls. Their guild house, excavated in the 1960s, reveals sophisticated storage facilities and meeting rooms decorated with Lupini-themed mosaics. In Spain's Baetica province, tax records show that tenant farmers often paid landowners with a portion of their Lupini harvest rather than currency. Similarly, in North Africa, Roman officials accepted tax payments in Lupini beans from regions with limited access to imperial coinage. This practice created a secondary bean-based economy operating alongside the monetary system throughout rural areas. Archaeological evidence suggests provincial governors maintained tight control over Lupini distribution networks. The governor's compound in Roman Britain at Fishbourne contained specialised storage facilities for Lupini beans with official seals, indicating government oversight of distribution. Similar administrative controls appear at provincial capitals throughout the empire, demonstrating centralised management of this critical resource. The economic impact of Lupini cultivation transformed newly conquered territories. In Gaul, introduction of systematic Lupini farming generated agricultural surpluses that supported urbanisation and specialised craft production. Regions previously limited by protein scarcity suddenly produced excess nutrition, allowing population growth and economic diversification. Tax receipts from Spain show nearly a threefold increase in revenue following widespread adoption of Lupini cultivation in the 1st century CE. Emperor Septimius Severus perhaps demonstrated the political value of Lupini beans most clearly when he doubled military rations of the legumes while campaigning in Britain, effectively securing army loyalty during a period of contested succession. His famous advice to his sons, enrich the soldiers and scorn everyone else, might well have applied to his strategic distribution of these valuable beans. As Lupini beans spread throughout the empire with Roman expansion, they encountered new growing conditions and culinary traditions that would transform both the beans and the cultures that adopted them. Lupini beans proved remarkably adaptable as they journeyed from Rome's heartland to the empire's furthest frontiers. In Hispania, modern Spain and Portugal, farmers developed larger seeded varieties that thrived in the Iberian Peninsula's diverse microclimates. Archaeological seed remains from Roman-era farms near modern Seville show Lupini beans nearly twice the size of their Italian counterparts, suggesting deliberate selection for increased yield. This Spanish variety, still cultivated today as Ultramusis, produces a distinctively sweeter flavour after processing. Britain's cooler, damper climate required different cultivation approaches entirely. Roman agricultural manuals specific to Britannia recommended autumn planting rather than spring sowing used in Mediterranean regions. British Lupini fields typically included drainage ditches at 10-foot intervals, a pattern still visible in aerial surveys of ancient farmland. The humidity also affected processing methods, with British Roman sites showing evidence of covered drying structures, unlike the open-air drying platforms common in Italy. North African provinces developed particularly innovative culinary applications. In what is now Tunisia, archaeological evidence reveals specialised grinding stones designed specifically for producing Lupini flour. This flour formed the basis for a distinctive flatbread mentioned in local writings and still made in rural Tunisian communities today under the name Kesra el Termes. Roman-era cookware from the region includes unique double-chambered vessels that allowed Lupini beans to be steamed above boiling water, a technique that spread back to Rome itself by the 3rd century. Egypt's long agricultural tradition transformed Lupini cultivation into a science. Papyrus records from Roman Egypt detail precisely timed planting schedules integrated with Nile flooding patterns, achieving yields up to 40% higher than other provinces. Egyptian preparation methods uniquely included fermenting lupini beans with dates and honey, creating a protein-rich condiment that appears in trading records as far away as Gaul. The Danube provinces specialised in lupini-based beverages. Archaeological evidence from military outposts in Pannonia, modern Hungary, reveals equipment for producing a fermented lupini drink similar to modern soy milk. This nutritious beverage appears frequently in military supply records, suggesting it was standard issue for troops stationed along the frontier. Gaul's contribution was perhaps most innovative. A lupini-based cheese analogue created by grinding, fermenting and pressing the beans into solid blocks. Roman writers describe this Gallic creation as similar to cheese yet made from plants, essentially inventing plant-based cheese substitutes nearly 2 millennia before their modern popularity. This technique spread throughout the Western provinces, with regional variations developing unique flavouring additions. Greece maintained its distinct culinary identity even under Roman rule, incorporating lupini beans into their tradition of olive preservation. The resulting lupini-olive mixture, still served in some Greek tavernas, or elias me lupina, combined the protein of lupini beans with the fat of olives for a nutritionally complete preservation method perfectly suited to maritime trade. After centuries feeding an empire, lupini beans faced their greatest challenge when Rome itself began to crumble, forcing this resilient crop to adapt to a dramatically changing world. When Rome's administrative structures crumbled in the 5th century, lupini beans demonstrated the same resilience that had made them valuable to the empire. Archaeological excavations at post-Roman settlements reveal continuous lupini cultivation despite dramatic political changes. At the former Roman town of Verulamium, modern St Albans, England, lupini bean remains appear consistently in layers dating from 100 CE through 650 CE, spanning both Roman occupation and Anglo-Saxon settlement, evidence that practical agricultural knowledge survived even as imperial institutions vanished. Monasteries emerged as crucial preservers of lupini cultivation techniques. The Benedictine rule, established in 529 CE, specifically mentioned lupini beans as appropriate food for monks during fasting periods. Monastery account books from the 6th through 9th centuries document systematic lupini planting rotations. At Monte Cassino in Italy, monastic agricultural records detail specific lupini varieties suited to different soil conditions, knowledge directly inherited from Roman agricultural writers like Columella. The Byzantine Empire maintained unbroken lupini traditions in the Eastern Mediterranean. Emperor Justinian's agricultural reforms in the 6th century actually expanded lupini cultivation throughout Greece, Anatolia and the Levant. Byzantine military rations continued to include lupini beans, maintaining their strategic importance. When the empire faced Arab expansion in the 7th century, emergency food stores in Constantinople included massive lupini reserves, over 500 tons according to contemporary accounts. Cultivation patterns shifted with new political realities. Roman-era centralized production gave way to more localized, subsistence-focused farming. In Western Europe, pollen samples from post-Roman settlements show smaller, scattered lupini plantings rather than the large specialized fields of the imperial period. This fragmentation followed political boundaries, with distinct regional varieties emerging as exchange between formerly connected areas diminished. The Visigothic kingdom in Spain maintained particularly strong lupini cultivation traditions. Their legal code, the Forum Judicum, included specific provisions regarding lupini bean harvests and storage requirements. Excavated Visigothic sites reveal specialized lupini processing areas nearly identical to Roman predecessors, suggesting direct knowledge transmission despite political rupture. In North Africa, Vandal rulers adopted and adapted Roman agricultural systems after conquering the former province in 439 CE. Archaeobotanical evidence shows consistent lupini cultivation through the transition, with Vandal-era innovations in irrigation techniques actually increasing yields in some areas. When Byzantine forces reconquered the region a century later, they encountered flourishing lupini production maintained through multiple political changes. Perhaps most remarkably, lupini beans facilitated cultural exchange between former imperial territories and new arrivals. Germanic peoples, who had previously known little about legume cultivation, adopted lupini beans from conquered Roman populations. Archaeological evidence from early Anglo-Saxon settlements shows increased lupini consumption within a generation of their arrival in Britain. Edible proof that practical knowledge could transcend political and ethnic boundaries. While lupini beans survived Rome's collapse, they would face an even greater challenge with the arrival of new crops from distant continents that would forever change European agriculture. The Columbian Exchange brought potatoes to European shores in the 1570s, setting the stage for lupini beans' greatest challenge in nearly 2 millennia. Agricultural records from Spain, the entry point for New World crops, show the first dramatic shift. Between 1580 and 1650, lupini cultivation in Castile declined by approximately 40% as potatoes gained prominence. By 1700, many regions that had grown lupini beans continuously since Roman times had abandoned them almost entirely. What drove this rapid replacement? Potatoes offered raw production advantages that overwhelmed lupini beans' nutritional superiority. A single acre of potatoes yielded approximately 12 tons of food compared to 1-2 tons of lupini beans. This productivity difference proved decisive during Europe's population boom in the 17th and 18th centuries. Field records from Italian estates show lupini beans yielding approximately 800,000 calories per acre, while potatoes produced over 4 million. A 5-fold increase in raw energy production that overshadowed lupini's superior protein and mineral content. The nutritional trade-off proved devastating. While potatoes provide only 2% protein by weight compared to lupini beans' 26-36%, the sheer volume of potato production masked this deficiency. European peasants consuming mainly potatoes received adequate calories but suffered protein malnutrition unknown or shown in the lupini-based Roman diet. Average height measurements from skeletal remains show a decline of nearly 2 inches in adult stature between late medieval populations and their potato-dependent 18th century descendants. Silent testimony to declining protein consumption. Regional variations in lupini decline followed economic and cultural patterns. Mediterranean areas maintained lupini cultivation longer than Northern Europe, with Portugal and southern Italy continuing significant production into the 19th century. Mountainous regions generally abandoned lupini beans more rapidly, as potatoes thrived at elevations where lupini cultivation struggled. By 1800, lupini beans had become primarily animal fodder throughout most of their former range, with human consumption increasingly rare. Agricultural manuals reflect this transition in stark terms. While 16th century farming texts typically dedicated entire chapters to lupini cultivation, by 1750 most European agricultural guides mentioned them only briefly, if at all. The Spanish agronomist Alonso de Herrera's comprehensive 1513 agricultural guide devoted 12 pages to lupini cultivation. The revised 1818 edition reduced this to a single paragraph focused on their use as green manure rather than human food. The economic efficiencies of potato cultivation proved irresistible even to conservative farming communities. Potatoes required less labour per calorie produced and could be harvested mechanically, while lupini beans demanded hand harvesting. As rural labour shifted toward industrial employment, crops requiring intensive manual attention declined precipitously. Agricultural census data shows lupini bean cultivation in Spain decreasing from 150,000 hectares in 1750 to barely 25,000 by 1900. Though nearly forgotten by modern agriculture, lupini beans found unexpected sanctuary in certain isolated communities, where ancient traditions proved surprisingly resilient against the tide of agricultural change. Like botanical time capsules, pockets of living lupini tradition survived in isolated communities throughout the Mediterranean. Portugal's Azores Islands, settled in the 15th century and then largely forgotten by mainland agricultural trends, maintained continuous lupini cultivation into the modern era. The island of São Miguel still grows a lupini variety genetically similar to Roman-era beans, found at archaeological sites in Lusitania. Local farmers continued the traditional 5-day soaking process using stone basins virtually unchanged from Roman designs. Religious and cultural festivals proved crucial for preserving lupini knowledge. In Sicily's mountainous interior, the Feast of St. Joseph each March features Macu di Lupini, a traditional soup that combines lupini beans with wild fennel in a preparation documented in writings from the 12th century. Similarly, Portugal's Festival of São João in June incorporates tremoços, lupini beans, as ritual foods, continuing traditions that predate Portuguese nationhood itself. Calabria's Polonneau Mountains harbour some of Europe's most intact lupini traditions. This remote region maintained traditional lupini cultivation uninterrupted from Roman times through the 21st century. Elderly cultivators still possess specialised knowledge about soil selection, planting timing, and processing techniques passed down through family instruction rather than written documentation. Their lupini varieties show remarkable genetic stability, with modern beans closely resembling archaeological specimens from the region. Economic specialisation helped preserve lupini cultivation in specific communities. Campania's lupini producers developed export markets supplying Italian immigrant communities worldwide throughout the 20th century. This commercial niche, though small, provided sufficient economic incentive to maintain traditional knowledge, when most European agriculture had abandoned lupini beans entirely. Family businesses in this region often specialise exclusively in lupini processing, some operating continuously for over 2 centuries. Ethnographic research reveals fascinating mechanisms of knowledge preservation. In Sardinia's Central Highlands, specialised vocabulary for lupini cultivation persists in local dialects, including terms directly derived from Latin agricultural manuals. Cultivation timing is still linked to saints' days that replaced Roman festivals, but maintained the same agricultural calendar. Children's games involving lupini beans serve as informal educational tools, teaching optimal soaking times and quality assessment through play activities documented as far back as Byzantine records. Perhaps most remarkable is the persistence of lupini street vendors in Mediterranean cities. The lupinaro in Naples, the tramuceru in Sicily, and the tremocero in Lisbon maintain nearly identical practices to vendors depicted in Roman frescoes, selling ready-to-eat lupini beans from portable stands as convenient street food. These urban traditions preserved lupini consumption even as home preparation declined, creating continuous demand for rural production. These preserved traditions maintained not just the beans themselves, but the ecological knowledge systems that sustained them for millennia. Village-level seed selection, soil management practices, and processing techniques retained agricultural wisdom largely lost to industrial farming, living repositories of Roman agricultural science hidden in plain sight. After centuries of neglect, lupini beans are experiencing an unexpected renaissance as modern nutritional science rediscovers what Roman legionaries knew thousands of years ago. Modern nutritional science is validating what Roman soldiers knew through experience. Lupini beans offer extraordinary health benefits that outperform most contemporary protein sources. A landmark 2018 study published in the Journal of Functional Foods analysed the complete nutritional profile of lupini beans, confirming their exceptional 36% protein content and revealing a surprising bonus. Lupini beans contain all 9 essential amino acids in proportions nearly identical to the ideal protein pattern recommended by the World Health Organization. Few plant proteins can make this claim without supplementation or careful combining. Clinical research has uncovered benefits Roman physicians could only have guessed at. A 2020 study in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition demonstrated that consuming just 30 grams of lupini bean protein daily reduced LDL cholesterol by an average of 12% among participants with moderately elevated levels. The effect rivals pharmaceutical interventions, but without side effects. What explains this remarkable property? Lupini beans contain unique peptides that bind to cholesterol in the digestive tract, preventing its absorption. Diabetes researchers have shown particular interest in lupini beans' extraordinary glycemic profile. Despite containing substantial carbohydrates, their glycemic index of 15 is among the lowest of any food, far below quinoa, 53, lentils, 32, or chickpeas, 28. A University of Melbourne study tracked blood glucose levels in participants consuming lupini-based versus grain-based meals with identical calorie counts. The lupini group showed 40% smaller blood sugar fluctuations and reported feeling full 90 minutes longer on average, exactly the properties that sustained Roman legionaries on long marches. The athletic performance community has enthusiastically embraced lupini beans as a superior plant protein. Comparative analysis with other protein sources reveals why. Lupini beans provide more protein per calorie than chicken breast, with nearly 3 times the fibre and none of the saturated fat. They deliver more iron than spinach, more potassium than bananas, and more calcium than many dairy products. Could Roman military dominance have been partially fueled by this nutritional advantage? Market data reflects growing awareness of these benefits. Retail sales of lupini bean products increased by 85% between 2018 and 2024, with particularly strong growth in ready-to-eat formats. Food technology companies have developed lupini flour with 40% protein content, substantially higher than any other plant-based flour, enabling high-protein versions of pasta, bread and baked goods without the gritty texture of many plant proteins. Perhaps most surprising is lupini beans' prebiotic effect on gut health. Research published in the journal Microbiome demonstrated that regular lupini consumption increases beneficial gut bacteria associated with reduced inflammation and improved immunity. Roman soldiers presumably didn't understand the microbiome, but their gut health may have benefited from regular lupini consumption during campaigns when other fresh foods were unavailable. Beyond their impressive health benefits, lupini beans might hold solutions to some of our most pressing agricultural and environmental challenges, just as they did for Romans 2 millennia ago. The agricultural challenges facing our warming planet look remarkably similar to those ancient Romans confronted in the Mediterranean's arid landscapes. Lupini beans offer solutions that align perfectly with modern sustainability goals. Their nitrogen-fixing roots add up to 200 kilojoules of nitrogen per hectare annually, equivalent to about 400 kilojoules of commercial fertilizer, while requiring 0 fossil fuel inputs. Unlike most crops that deplete soil with each harvest, lupini beans leave the ground more fertile than they found it, just as they did for Roman farmers, rotating them with grain crops. Water usage metrics reveal lupini beans' extraordinary efficiency. Producing 1 kilogram of lupini protein requires approximately 4,000 litres of water, compared to 5,120 litres for soybeans, 10,000 litres for rice protein, and a staggering 112,000 litres for beef protein. As water scarcity intensifies globally, crops delivering maximum nutrition with minimal irrigation will become increasingly valuable. Could Roman water management wisdom, combined with lupini cultivation, help address modern drought challenges? Carbon footprint analysis further highlights lupini beans' sustainable advantages. Recent life cycle assessment studies show that 1 kilogram of lupini protein produces approximately 1.2 kilojoules of CO2 equivalent emissions, dramatically lower than beef, 60 kilojoules, pork in 24 kilojoules, or even chicken, 10 or 16 kilojoules. Even compared to other plant proteins, lupini beans perform exceptionally well, producing 30% fewer emissions than processed soy protein and 40% fewer than pea protein isolate. Agricultural research institutions have launched ambitious lupini breeding programs focusing on reduced alkaloid content, increased yield, and enhanced drought resistance. The European Union's Horizon Europe program recently committed $28 million to developing improved lupini varieties specifically for marginal agricultural lands throughout the Mediterranean basin, precisely the growing conditions Romans mastered 2 millennia ago. For farmers facing climate uncertainty, lupini beans offer compelling economic benefits. Their ability to thrive in poor soils with minimal inputs translates to lower production costs and reduced risk during drought years. Market analysis from the Plant Protein Alliance projects that lupini farming can deliver 30–45% higher profit margins compared to conventional grain crops, particularly as climate volatility increases and protein prices rise. Perhaps most promising is lupini beans' potential for regenerative agriculture systems. Their deep taproots prevent erosion while improving soil structure. Their nitrogen fixation reduces dependency on synthetic fertilizers, and their drought resistance minimizes irrigation needs. These attributes make them ideal candidates for rebuilding degraded farmland, turning back the clock on soil depletion while meeting modern nutritional demands. As we confront climate change, population growth, and environmental degradation, this ancient Roman superfood offers a proven agricultural solution hiding in plain sight. The beans that sustained legions, fed emperors, and survived centuries of agricultural changes may yet help us navigate our most pressing food system challenges. If we're wise enough to learn from Roman agricultural innovation, rather than relegating it to history books.